A pleasant morning to each and everyone. I am Jian Carlo Lisbos, and for this presentation, I am going to analyze the my chosen novel entitled Noli Me Tangere by Dr. Jose Rizal. So Noli Me Tangere is one of his famous novels, and it is translated in English as Touch Me Not and in Tagalog as Huwag Mo Akong Hawakan. And for the summary of the novel, after 7 years studying in Europe, Juan Crisostomo Ibarra arrives. So Juan Crisostomo Ibarra is the protagonist of the novel. So he learns that Padre Damaso killed his father, which is Don Rafael Ibarra, in prison. So Captain Tiago hosts a welcoming celebration in San Diego for Padre Damaso, Padre Sibayla, Doña Victorina, and other important visitors. He ignores insults and leaves to perform important things. Ibarra loves Maria Clara, Captain Tiago's daughter. So they discuss love after the party. Before leaving San Diego and discovering the truth about his father's murder from Lieutenant Guevara, he resolved to forget his retribution and carry out his father's educational plan to prove his good intentions. A man dies in a school inauguration accident meant for Ibarra. Ibarra would be dead without Elias, a stranger warning him. So Elias was the one who helped Ibarra during the accident. The event goes on. Padre Damaso taunts Ibarra and his father at supper. Maria Clara stops him from attacking the monk when he loses control. Next, he is excommunicated. Padre Damaso makes Captain Tiago cut Ibarra off from his daughter. The friar wants Maria Clara to marry Spaniard Alfonso Linares. The Captain General helps Ibarra lift the excommunication. However, an insurrection blames him and lands him in Manila. Linares and Maria Clara are engaged, and Captain Tiago is hosting a party. Elias helps Ibarra escape that night. He confronts Maria Clara about her betrayal. Maria Clara explains Padre Salve took Ibarra's letter before he left for Europe and returned for her mother's 2 letters to Padre Damaso concerning an unborn child, Maria Clara, Padre Damaso's daughter. Ibarra flees Maria Clara on a boat with Elias. Ibarra is hidden in the boat under a bangka grass pile from the civil guards. Elias jumps into the water to deceive them. Elias enters a wilderness, injured and dying. He observes Basilio crying over his mother's corpse. He requests the boy burn his body with sisa. Maria Clara mourns Ibarra's death. In despair, she asks Padre Damaso to put her in a nunnery or she will die. Friar agrees reluctantly. His death followed. She doesn't know Ibarra was alive. So that was the summary of the novel, Noli Me Tangere. And that novel will be analyzed, and the literary lens to be used for this novel is Marxist lens. So we all know about the Marxist lens. It is a type of literary criticism based on the writings of German philosopher Karl Marx. So we have already discussed this kind of literary lens, and in its simplest form, Marxist criticism attempts to show the relationship between literature and the social mainly economic conditions under which it was produced. So here are some examples of the main focus of Rizal's novels. The main themes of the novel, Nola Me Tangere, are colonialism, religion, power, revolution, reform, and education. And now let us proceed to the three texts as evidence for analysis with substantial arguments from cited sources. We have the first text. So for the first text, we have two texts that will be analyzed using the Marxist theory. So the line is, I can concede that the government has no knowledge of the people, but I believe the people know less of the government. There are useless officials, evil, if you like, but there are also good ones. And these are not able to accomplish anything because they encounter an inert mass, the population that takes little part in matters that concern them. The second text is but because their ancestors were men of righteousness, shall we consent to the abuses of their degenerate descendants? Because they did us a great good, would we be guilty if we prevented them from doing us evil? So these two texts um, were said by by Crisostomo Ibarra. So for the next slide, the explanation for the text in the previous slide. So the words touch me not were originally spoken by the resurrected Christ to Mary Magdalene. The title reflects one of the novel's key messages. One negligent step and you'll stumble. One false move and you'll die. And during the time of Rizal, the nation was weak and powerless. People were led astray. Direct and indirect oppressions were pervasive, particularly those perpetrated by friars, as depicted by the characters of Padre Damaso, Padre Salve, Padre Camora, and Padre Sibayla. Through his characters, his work shows the brutality, oppression, greed, and manipulation committed by the Spaniards against the Filipinos. In addition to Sisa, Julie, Crispin, and Basilio, and Esegani, Crisostomo Ibarra shows a stereotypical character who embodies the downtrodden, tragic events occurred in their lives as a result of the escalating tyranny of the Spanish. Hypocrisy, vices such as gambling, etc., and social climbing can also be outcomes of these oppressions among desperate Filipinos. And that concludes the first text and its explanation. Now let's proceed to the second text. So here it says in chapter 4, Senior Guevara tells Crisostomo. He said that Don Rafael's trouble started when Padre Damaso accused him of not going to confession. The trouble started with Padre Damaso for what motive I cannot explain. Padre Damaso accused him of not going to confession. And then Padre Damaso was alluding to him from the pulpit. And also for the next line, Senior Guevara said that John Rafael told him that, do you believe that God forgives a crime, a murder? For example, just by telling it to a priest, who in the end is a man like us, I have different idea of God. For me, an evil is not corrected by another evil, neither forgiven with empty weepings, nor alms given to the church. And for the explanation of this text, the friars' abuse of power was evident in both Noli Me Tangere. The church's influence during the Philippine colonial society was too much and eventually overflowed into the state affairs. The abuse of power by friars epitomized the system that entangled church and state. So this system stripped Filipinos of the opportunity to freely fight against injustices that they observed to be moving in this very system. The abuse of power held by religious officials undermined the power of the government, and this proved to the system that attacked the Filipino colonial society from within. So it's clearly um, visible that there is an oppression happening in the novel. So for the third text, the Philippine is religious and loves pain. The Philippines will realize how much it does for our nation. There is abuse. One can't deny it. There are defects, but Spain is working to introduce reforms that will correct these things and bring future projects to bear. Spain is not just self-interest. So this line was said by Crisostomo Ibarra. And for its explanation, in the novel, friars become the principal oppressors. Government officials were subordinate to these friars, and all of this represent the superstructures of the community, which is the base from which they continue to spread their power, their abusive manipulations, and their pursuit of their own interest by exploiting the weaknesses of Filipinos or the proletariats. The friars have the most influence in the community and are capable of collecting taxes, putting on individual to debt, dictating how cities and villages should be governed, and becoming political leaders with the assistance of the governor, generals, and civil guards. So that's the explanation of the third text. And although the major purpose Rizal authored the novel was to highlight tyranny, he did not endorse violent revolution as a means of eradicating these oppressions. For A Call of Independence, he mentions revolution as an alternative. So a rebellion led by Andres Bonifacio was sparked by Rizal's revolutionary ideas. So that is the explanation of the third text. And next, the conclusion to wrap up the presentation. The novel Nola Me Tangere was the beginning of Rizal's argument and appeal for reform of Spanish rule. El filibusterismo, his subsequent work will demonstrate the dangers of an untimely revolt. Ibarra de Nole was still uncertain as to how he would be able to accept the oppression exhibited by the Spaniards, particularly the friars. He changed significantly in Fili, and from a Marxist perspective, this change is characteristic of those who have been oppressed by capitalists and authorities whose only goal is to achieve more power and dominance over the entire colonized land. And that concludes my presentation about the novel Nola Me Tangere using the Marxist literary lens. Thank you.